Hello again. This is question number 2 on your handout. And this question is about meek land. And let's get going. So it's an economy of meek land is in long run equilibrium with a balanced budget. Again, I think the preface, just really highlighting some of those important concepts that we're going to need later on is very important to do right away as you get into this question. So using a correctly labeled graph of aggregate supply and aggregate demand, show each of the following. You got to show the long run, you got to show the real GDP and the price level. So before we do that on the piece of paper, I just want to look at letter B rather, and we're going to do all of those things together. So it says assumes consumer confidence falls. Show on your graph in part A the short run impact of the change in consumer confidence and label the new equilibrium price level and output Y1 and PL1 respectively. So again, long run equilibrium, and now we've got consumer confidence falling. So that's going to be an aggregate demand shift. So if we draw this out, we should have a beautiful short run aggregate supply with the long run aggregate supply and aggregate demand, a real GDP, a YE, and PLE. We've got price level up here. The drop in consumer confidence is going to push this aggregate demand to the left. And I believe we were to label this PL1 and Y1. Forgive me for how messy that graph is, because writing on the screen is kind of difficult to do neatly. So that's what we're looking for. So for the first part of this question, we are getting 2 points, one for the long run aggregate supply and one putting the output level in the correct spot. And then we're going to get another point for shifting the aggregate demand to the left. Now we have to take that and we have to transfer it over to a Phillips curve. So using a correctly labeled graph with the short run and long run Phillips curves, show the effect of the fall in consumer confidence on inflation. Label the initial long run equilibrium point A and the new one point B. So similar to what we've practiced in class, I'm just going to change colors so we can see it a little differently over here. We've got the Phillips curve and we've got that long run Phillips curve. And some of these questions want you to do both, and some of them just want you to do one. So pay close attention to which they want you to do. You don't want to, I guess the moral of the story is don't give yourself more work than you have to, because every little bit that you do, oops, that wasn't intentional. Every little bit that you do is a little bit of time you have to spend. And if you can save yourself a little time by just focusing on what's necessary, that'll help you out in the long run. So this initial point is point A. We have an inflation rate. Remember, demand shifted to the left, so that means we're going to be on the line and we're going to shift to the right in the opposite direction. And we've got a higher unemployment level and we've got a lower price level, and that aligns with what we showed over here. So I guess the Phillips curve is one of those skills that I feel like if you do forget it, if you're thinking, oh man, am I supposed to go to the right or to the left on this, take comfort in knowing that you can figure it out. So if I start here and I notice that on my left side, I have a drop in GDP, well, that means that the unemployment rate is going to increase. So I must be going to the right because this is a number line. It goes from 0 to a higher number. The same thing with the prices. So over here, we saw the price level fall. And if I travel down the line, I see the price level falling. So you can kind of guess and check if you find yourself in a moment of just being uncertain about what to do next. All right, so the next part of the question is asking us to now think about government policy. So it says, if the government and the central bank do not pursue any discretionary policy change, how does the fall in consumer confidence affect government transfer payments? I'm so excited that this is coming up because in class we talked about the transfer payments on that quiz. And if you all recall, the transfer payments are things like unemployment insurance and Social Security and food stamps and Medicaid and Medicare. And incidentally, just for an FYI, not all of those are going to change because of consumer confidence, but some of them are. And essentially, the transfer payments in this country are going to increase. And the reason why is if you go back to the graph that we were just making, unemployment has increased, right? So if unemployment's higher, well, first of all, people are going to be qualifying for unemployment insurance that weren't before. Maybe some people get fall into a situation where their income becomes so low that they now qualify for the food stamps program or the Medicaid program or temporary assistance for needy families, which some people will refer to as welfare. So those are all transfer payments. So the transfer payments in Meekland are going to increase, and they're going to increase because there is more unemployment, and which leads to, and you can sort of list all those different examples that follow. So for both of these last two tasks, you have 2 points for part C and 2 for D. So you have to explain that they're going to increase, and then you need to give an explanation. Based on that quiz that we just took, I feel like part D might be something that you guys might want to rewind and listen to that again if you forgot that. But that vocabulary word is important to internalize and to remember. Next. Oh, the loanable funds. Here she is. Okay, so draw a correctly labeled graph of the loanable funds market in Meekland. Show the effect of the change in government transfer payments you identified in part D on the real interest rate. Well, in order to do this, I must have to know something about the budget. And if we go back up to the beginning of the question, we had a balanced budget. So now, if the transfer payments are going to increase, then we must be having more government spending. And we currently have a balanced budget. So how are we going to afford increased government spending? We're going to have to borrow money. So moving back over to graphing, you're going to have to show that loanable funds market. And the demand for loanable funds is going to be shifting to the right. So just make sure, I might sound like a broken record, but again, these are a little messy because writing on the screen is tough, but we want to get all of our labels here. Okay, and this is real interest rate. And just make sure it's clear. And then again, like we've always said, let's do real interest rates increase. Write a little note over here and just make it clear to the reader. Going back to the question, you're going to get 2 points for that. You're going to get 1 point for just making a loanable funds graph correctly, and then you get a second point for shifting the demand to the right and showing the effect on the real interest rate. So now, this is, I think, the most challenging part of the question, and it's getting into this whole concept of long run. And I think that for a lot of us, this is kind of new still, but you're probably getting the hang of it. In the absence of any changes in fiscal and monetary policy, so imagine if we go back up to here with the fall in consumer confidence, and there was no government interaction. We just left the economy alone. That's what this is saying. In the long run, will the short run aggregate supply curve shift to the left, shift to the right, or remain unchanged as a result of the fall in consumer confidence? Explain. You do not have to graph this, but you have to envision it. So if I go back up to the graph that we made in part A, price level is the key, and so is productivity. Remember, what are the two questions that you ask yourself when you are considering what the short run aggregate supply is going to do when it adjusts to a new long run? You have to ask yourself, what do I know about input prices? We'll put the input prices there in case we don't forget it. And the second one is, what do I know about productivity? So, walk yourself through those questions every single time. Okay? So let's go to this graph. What do we know about input prices? Well, input prices fell. Input prices fell. What do I know about productivity? I know nothing about productivity. There's nothing in this question to indicate that productivity has slowed or increased. So if price level's lower, everything in the economy is now going to experience that as well. So if I run a business, all my intermediate goods are cheaper too. So you didn't have to graph this, but I just wanted to show it to you so you could see it, is that the short run aggregate supply would shift to the right. And how we answer that is, there's 2 points up for grabs here. We have to state that it is going to shift to the right. And we also have to describe because, input prices are lower. And, do a nice complete sentence to describe that. But they are lower, and therefore businesses will be able to produce more because their costs of production are cheaper. So that's question number 2, good old Meekland. I think Meekland makes an appearance in a few questions, so you might see them again.